Last week, we had quite a flurry of news, and the highlight of it was the NFP release on Friday. We'll be covering that and so much more, and even in this week's session where we have a lot of news coming up. My name is Samson Mzera, and welcome to this session of the Market Watch series where we cover the news, the charts, what is happening, and what to expect. So be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more. Last week was very rough for the dollar. On Wednesday, we had the JOLTS opening that had a very disappointing reading. And next, we had the ADP that also had a very disappointing reading. So if you look, for example, at the dollar index, we were in a downtrend. And it seemed as though we were going even lower from that recovery that we were seeing from the past couple of weeks. So that meant that we did hit the bottom of the previous trend, and it was seeming as though we might head lower because of that disappointing news. Remember, the news reassures that the Fed is going to cut more aggressively as the market now turns from inflation to the health of the US economy. So going ahead, like we have the CPI reading coming in this week, it's not going to be as important as it used to be now that the market is focusing on employment instead of inflation. So we had that move from Wednesday to Thursday on the DXY. However, when the reading came in, we had a very low employment reading. However, the numbers were still higher than the 89K we witnessed in the previous month. So this meant that the news was very mixed. And if you look at the markets, for example, if you look at XAU USD, we did have it tick higher. And this also happened in other pairs like also the pound. We did see it tick higher, and it was because of that mixed announcement or that mixed news that came in. So we had the tick higher, but then as time went by, the market started pricing in that we're still having a better reading and we are still on track with the current fundamentals. And this is why we saw the dollar strengthening a few hours or a few minutes after that tick higher happened. If you look at the pound, we did attempt to break higher. We can see that sweep over there that went through the previous resistance level. However, you're now coming back down to that support zone, and it's flat out across other pairs, for example, the euro and gold, indicating that we are going to see some dollar strength, and the market is kind of playing a risk aversion game at the moment by piling into the dollar. This risk aversion theme clearly shows itself in indices. Now, if you look at the S&P 500, immediately the news came out, it was very obvious where it's supposed to be headed to. We did have a more straightforward interpretation of this, especially on US 500, where that downtrend continued going lower, because we are seeing numbers coming in consistent with the rhetoric of that the US is kind of slowing down and the economy might not be in such good condition. Then we had stocks coming lower, and that is why we are seeing the S&P dropping. At the moment, we are witnessing a pullback on the 4-hour time frame, probably going to feel that imbalance before we determine the next direction. And one key thing to look at this week is the inflation expectations. Now, towards Wednesday, we are expecting a lower reading on the year-on-year inflation, and this might result to seeing some weakness in the dollar, because in as much as we're not focusing on inflation, it's falling in line with expectations of a cooling off economy, and this might be also cause some concern. So going ahead, we are going to be monitoring how the market perceives last week's news. If you're going to at all see a continuation of the current trend, then we should expect momentum below these support levels that are forming. However, the lower reading in inflation should at least help us have a slightly weaker dollar, or at least before the news arrives. So if you're expecting a low inflation reading, this should part of that strength we are seeing in the dollar. So we might see some weak trend. However, it's up to the market perceptions, and we'll be looking at these key levels to determine where the market is headed to and what it's perceiving. So if we see any break through key levels, for example, in the pound or in gold, then it should be noted that we are still carrying along that momentum from last week. Having said that, thank you for tuning into this session of the Market Watch series. If you want to trade any of these assets, the link is in the description, or you can visit the HFM website for more. See you in the next one.